With that, I need to add something because it's spread widely and it's nonsense. Absolute nonsense that's baseless and has no foundation in the words of the scholars to the best of my knowledge. After exhaustive review, there's a claim that people are praying wrong when they pray sitting down. And the Prophet ﷺ said, for the sick person who prays sitting down, فَالصَّلَاةُ الْإِمَاءُ بِالرَّأْسِ لِلرُّكُوعِ وَالسُّجُودِ يُومِئُ بِرَأْسِهِ لِرُكُوعِهِ وَسُجُودِهِ وَيَكُونُ سُجُودُهُ أَخْفَضَ مِنْ رُكُوعِهِ. All of this is authentically established from our Prophet ﷺ, that when a person prays sitting, he makes the movement of his head lower with his sujood. When it's time for sujood, his head goes down more. Versus when it's time for ruku', then it goes down slightly, right? People have invented a new statement in this time that you do not bend your back at all because of the statement of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yumi'u bi ra'sihi. Then he gestures with his head. So the gesture of the head in the Arabic language, they claim, does not include the back. He didn't say with his head and his back. So that means you just move with your head a little bit over and then further more. This has been a mistake spread in the Arabic language. It's been a mistake translated and brought into the English language. And it needs to be corrected. It absolutely needs to be corrected. The books of fiqh are full of detailed discussions on how one should be bending over, how far, to what level, to one's full ability or close to it, how on a beast, riding on a camel, for example, does one bend over without falling off, to what limit should one bend. All of that's the discussion, and there's no basis for the statement that he doesn't bend his back at all. That is an invented statement that's being spread within the last year or two in the English language. Beware of it and be warned of it. It's an error. It doesn't have any basis in the statements of the scholars of old. Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, Sheikh Al-Albani, Sheikh Bin Baz, all of the scholars were asked this issue over their lives, and they all answered with he bends with his head and his back. Yanhani, he bends with his back forward. All of them said that. Tayyib, and the scholars are alive, and many of them are old, and they pray in chairs. Go look at them. Stop making claims that everyone on earth is doing something wrong, and you include in that all of the scholars. And you're the muhaqqiq, and you're the one bringing the correct position on the issue, and there's no origin for this position in the books of fiqh that you can quote. Just a brand new statement. So they say, well, it's the Arabic language. Yumi'u bi ra'sihi. He is to make a gesture with his head, and the Prophet ﷺ said with his head. Tayyib ya hada. Give me it's an Arab here. Uthman. Awmi biyadika ila al-bab. All right. Did everybody see what he did? He lifted his whole arm up and he pointed to the door. Al-ima'u bil-yad tashmalu ma yattasilu bil-yad. When you gesture with your hand, you're going to use your arm, your forearm, your bicep, your shoulder. Because no one would do this. If I said, imagine I said to him, Awmi bil-bab biyadik, and he went like this. No, sorry, I can't see anything you're doing. He just, the finger points from where it is without moving the hand. Everybody's going to say like this. Gesture to the door with your hand. You're going to go like this. You're going to move your arm. So now, al-ima'u bil-ra's yashmalu bil-darura inhina' al-dhahr. The movement of the head for the salat, for ruku', and then for sujood, that includes necessarily the movement of the back. It comes under, as Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen explained in detail, and the scholars before him, during his time and after him. It includes the bending of the back because of al-istita'a. That's the principle we're looking at right now. When you can't worship Allah with the base rule, then you bring as much of that as you can, according to your ability. So there might be someone who cannot move his body at all, and all he can move is his head, then his salat is correct. He moves his head halfway for the ruku' and fully down for the sujood because he cannot move his back. But if you can move your back, then you imitate the ruku' and come as close to it as you can by bending over in your seat, on the floor, in your chair, however you're praying seated, and then you rise back up with your back into your fully seated upright position. And then for sujood, you go down as far as you can go beyond where you went for ruku'. And that's what all of our scholars say today, and all of our scholars have said in the past, and all four madhahib are upon this. The only point of differing, as I mentioned, is some issues about how far must a person make the sujood. Is it to his complete ability or most of his ability and so on? Small issues like that. And when riding on a beast, how does that impact it? Because you're riding on a camel, if you bend over fully, you risk now losing your balance and falling off one side or the other. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. Please convey this to people who've been affected by this erroneous position, because it's a very confident mistake. Meaning the people who are spreading it, they're saying, I've seen so many people making this mistake, and it's a clear mistake. They're speaking as if it's consensus, or at least the majority of the scholars saying it, while you cannot find any support for it from amongst the scholars. Allahul Musta'an. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. This is what Allah Ta'ala has made easy for us to study this evening, the 23rd point alone. And just before we close, we'll take any corrections to any errors that I've made or any questions or comments on topic. Tafadhal Aba Abdul Fattah, you've had your hand up for a while. Jazakallahu khairan for your patience. Jazakallahu khairan. So the question is, what about some people when they're praying in a chair, they reach forward towards the ground? There are traditional positions amongst the scholars that support that, because it's not a new issue. Understand, praying sitting and praying on an animal and praying in chairs is not something that just happened now. That's the whole point of this discussion. This is not an issue that's come out now and we have to have like a modern day fatwa on it. This is 1,400 years old. The scholars have been talking about this issue, how to pray sitting when a person prays sitting. So some of them did mention he reaches forward for his sujood especially. Now, when you're praying on the ground, if you're able to make sujood, because you're sitting, you can possibly just actually make a real full sujood, right? You can't stand up to make the ruku', you're on the ground, you're not going to stand up. But you could potentially make a regular sujood, right, if you're praying on the ground sitting. So if that's the case, you just make your sujood regularly, with your hands on the ground and your face and everything normally. But if you need to go down to the sujood, or you can't go all the way down, the scholars mention this. For example, there's some people, they have a severe headache, a migraine that becomes intensified when their head goes onto the ground. But if they stop an inch or 2 or 3 inches before going to the ground, they stave that off and they don't have that blast of migraine right there. The scholars have said in this situation, he goes down as far as he can go, close to the sujood, and just stops there. And that counts for him as his sujood, because that's the level of his ability. So then the reaching forward with the hands, even when in a chair, it has a good angle and it has a basis in the statements of the scholars. There shouldn't be any problem with someone who, two people praying in a chair next to each other, one of them reaches his hands forward to try to come halfway to the ground when he leans forward for sujood, and the other one places them on his thighs, maybe to imitate the way the palms would be on the ground on his thigh. Those are both statements that go back to old traditional positions of the scholars. They're both an attempt to practice the best of what he's capable of doing. But just reaching forward, the hands are dangling in the air. That's what I'm saying has a basis in the earlier fatwa of the scholars. Some of them said he reaches as far as he can reach without touching the ground. He still reaches.
So on the knees or
the whole point is, do you see that in both scenarios, the person is trying to do the best he can? He's trying to fulfill the original position of sujood. So one angle, one person's ijtihad, his attempt to get it as close to the real sujood as he can, is placing his hands on his thighs like they are the ground. So he maybe opens his elbows up and he tries to do as much of the sujood as he can, considering his thighs to be like the ground. The other one is saying, my thighs are not the ground and the ground is there, so I'm going to reach out and try to put my hands on the ground and get as close to the ground as I can. Both are working within the framework of فَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ مَسْتَطَعْتُمْ, fear Allah to the level of your ability, versus the person who's fully capable of leaning forward and does not lean forward. And he believes this is correct and this is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. He doesn't have a basis for that. And I say this with the confidence that I've said it, knowing that the position has spread. Correct me. When I say there's no basis, correct me if there's a basis. That's all. I'm putting my neck out there and my name on the line. If I say there's no basis for this in the traditional books of the scholars, teach me and correct me if I've made a mistake. I'm available and I'm easily correctable, insha'Allah ta'ala. But if you can't find anything, then maybe you need to reevaluate this position and leave it.